another DorkLair action figure review. Today I'm taking a look at the Mythic Legions Ogre Scale Aracagorr from the Poxxus wave by Four Horsemen Studios. And I just want to leave this spinning around just for one more second here to take a look at the back of this figure, which is gorgeous. The metallic paints give it almost like this crystalline feel on those scales, and then that kind of contrasts with some of the flatter blues on the rest of the figure. Just an absolutely gorgeous, fantastic paint job, especially when you kind of contrast all of the magical nature of his skin tones or his, his scales or what have you. Contrast that with the like super aged and ancient looking kind of like real world feeling armor on that figure. So just absolutely like breathtaking figure to kind of just step back and look at for a couple spins. And here's a zoom in of that head sculpt. And here you can get a really good idea of what I'm talking about when I mentioned the metallics, the really shiny, almost like crystal-like metallics over here and along the top of the head, contrasted with the flatter paints of the face. It does have an articulated jaw, and the inside of the jaw does have some paint details here. So yeah, there's a lot going on. There is a little bit of a gap there. You can kind of close that gap a bit if you close the mouth somewhat. But yeah, if you open it wide open, there's going to be a gap. But lots of detail inside that mouth too. And aside from the paintwork, one of the other things that really sets Four Horsemen apart from the rest is their sculpture. And not just the sculptures themselves, which are obviously incredible, but their ability to get the factory to reproduce these sculptures with these super crisp details. A lot of figures, a lot of companies, they look really soft and smoothed out and like rounded edges, but everything on this figure is absolutely sharp as can be. It's just so impressive. And it's one of those things that, when I look at some of these other third-party companies that are making great figures, don't get me wrong, but something is missing, like something like really sharp and crisp is missing from those other lines. And while we have had this mold before, we've had this body and we've had this head. The body came with Kragnar, and then we had a variant essentially of this figure for the most part in the Cosmic Legions Scourge tribute to Whiplash. But that figure did not come with the new shoulder pauldrons. So we've got the new pauldrons and we've got the new harness piece here that does actually have an extra set of holes. So I'll show you that when we kind of get the thing apart. But there's the chest piece right there. It just has that old ancient weathered metal look to it, which is really cool. And then we've got that belt buckle here. And then more of those like shiny metallics in the scales down the legs, and more of that ancient armor on the lower legs. And then we have the dragon feet. And then here's a look at the tail. Again, more of that shiny paintwork mixed in with the flatter paint. And it is a static piece, and it does kind of taper at the top. So visually it has kind of a weird look from this angle. But I think it looks awesome, and it's a nice counterbalance to the figure. So it's good for posing, and it can make like a little kickstand if you want to be really safe with standing your figure up. But I will say this figure is super sturdy. Like, this figure feels awesome, and it doesn't feel like it's going to topple over even when it's standing on 2 feet. And here he is fully upright, standing straight up and down so that you can get a good look at the overall silhouette of the figure. And he is a big boy, standing all the way up to 10 inches to the top of the head, maybe a little higher depending on how you angle the head and where those horns land. And for comparisons, here he is next to a couple other figures in the ogre scale. On the left is a part swapped Scourge that uses Bolthor the Tower and Kurzog parts, as well as a cape from Max Bird. And then on the right is just your basic Ogre Legion builder with the Cyclops head on there. So you can see like these dragon seer bodies, they are definitely like bigger and bulkier than your standard ogre scale figures. Next, a couple wave mates. On the left, we have Samir Scroll Warder, who is a 2.0 body. And on the right, we have Zendi Amanthir, who is a 1.0 body, to give you a sense of how this big dude looks next to these kind of standard figures. And then here he is with some brute scale wave mates. On the left is Kalazir the Genie. On the right is Tharnog's body with a couple parts from some other figures. Here's some other popular sword and sorcery lines. On the left is the NECA Ultimate D&D Warduke, and on the right is a Masterverse kit bashed He-Man that uses a custom head sculpt from Monster Machine Creations that was painted by Eric Miller. Here we have a couple Storm Collectibles Golden Axe figures, Tyrus Flare on the left, and that burnt out looking skeleton on the right. And here we have a Super 7 Conan on the left and a Bandai Movie Realization Samurai Ronin Mandalorian on the right. For accessories, he does come with 3 sets of hands. So on the figure right here, I do have the open sort of gesturing hands. He's also got a pair of closed fists. And of course, a pair of gripping hands, and all 3 sets of hands have horizontal hinges. One of the highlights of this figure for me actually is this sword. Because the Ogre Scale figures have been kind of lacking in the weapons department, they've all sort of come with the exact same like staff with bladed mace head on the top. So this is really nice to get something new for the Ogre Scale. I mean, this big old massive sword, and it's just done really nicely. It's a beautiful sword, and it does have a flame effect. It's pretty cool. Like it's a nice piece to have, but I think it's just the Aether flame effect reused, so it feels a little small on the sword. It'd be cool if it was like the full length of the blade, you know, but still, it's a nice little effect to have on there. And I did take a really fun shot with him holding the sword up with the flame, and this dude definitely has some presence and some magic going on. And so as I get into articulation, I do want to kind of pop some things apart. So these are on these just single pegs that can rotate a little bit. So as you are articulating the figure, they can move out of the way a bit. And then there are also like an extra set of holes here. So if you wanted to put the shoulder armor up on top here, you could do that, right? You could have the armor up top there, and then you could plug something else potentially into the back. The wings don't fit. You'd have to modify or pad them out somehow to get some of the wings in there, but you never know. You might come up with something down the road to use both of those for, or you could take this harness piece and use this on another figure. And as you can see, he does have the plugs in the back here that are there because the figure Kragnar has an extra set of arms. So theoretically, you could pop these out. Mine aren't coming right out. I think they might have been glued in here. This one moves a little bit, like I might be able to get this one to pop out, but you could totally heat these up, unglue them, get them out if you wanted to like buy a second version of the figure and then, you know, grab the arms off of that one and put them in the back here. It would be totally possible. And then for removing the belt, you can kind of see one of these plugs, the one on the right side over here, is an actual plug that you can pop off. The other one is sculpted on there. And then this can just lift right up over the head, and that can come right off. You can also remove these forearm pieces right here and then pop the hands back in to give him a bare arm look. So let me get these off so you can see how that looks. And so here is a look at the figure without all of the armor stuff on the upper part of the body. And when you pop the head off, you can see that there is a pretty like substantial ball joint at the top there. It's very stiff though. So when you're moving it around, you might want some heat, and it's pretty tough to pop that back in, but yeah, it goes on there pretty well. And so with the head, with that, you can kind of get his head to look up about this far, and then it can come all the way down this far, and it can cock side to side. You can get a lot of movement. Again, it's super stiff on mine, but I like that it's stiff because it's going to hold a pose really well. And like I said earlier, the jaw is articulated, and it's got a ton of range. Open and close. And then the shoulders are on a hinge, and they can come up to about this far, and they can also twist all the way around. Again, when you have that shoulder armor on there, it's going to be limited. There is a single jointed elbow that comes up a little bit below 90 degrees, and then there is a twist at that elbow. You do have a twist at the wrist, and you have that hinge at the wrist, so that can hinge back and forth. With the arm guard on there, it will limit things a little bit. And probably one of the coolest things about these new dragon bodies is that there is a diaphragm cut, and so you have a double barbell at the top, and he can crunch down like a ton, and he can crunch back up a bit, and he can cock side to side, and so it just adds a ton of range of motion. And at the waist there is a ball joint. He can angle forward and back and side to side, and he can twist as well. So there's just like a lot of good range of motion in that upper body. The legs are going to be a little bit hindered by all the stuff down here, but he can kick out pretty well. He just can't kick back very far because there is a butt. He does have a dragon bum right there, and then that kind of stops the backward movement of the leg. And there is a twist at the top of the leg. He can go out into the splits. You've got that single jointed knee. There's a twist below the knee. You have a hinge at the ankle, and then you have a rocker at the ankle and a twist. And I think I said earlier the tail is static, but there is actually a twist at the tail. It's just not a bendy kind of tail. It's a static tail in that it's solid plastic, not a bendy wire. And speaking of the tail, it does come separate in the box, which means you are going to have to install the tail. And there are two ways to do that. I'll show you the more difficult way first, and then I'll show you the easy way after. What most people do traditionally for this type of thing, because Legions are meant to be popped apart, people will pop the torso off and then put the tail in and then pop the torso back on. Now, the problem is that some people have been struggling to get that torso on and off. And I'm just going to kind of show you how I did it. So one of the things you want to do when you're heating this figure up, first of all, I just use blow dryer. I always just use a blow dryer. But you can angle the body in a way that kind of opens it up so that you can get access to that cavity in there and really heat that up there. And you can kind of do it from the front too a little bit. But that's my key thing, is to really warm that up first before you pop it off. And so I did get mine nice and warm with a blow dryer. So let's see if I can get mine off on video. Yeah, there we go. It's a little hard to do this on camera, but that once this is like super warm, it should pop off, fairly easily. You got to put a little energy into it, but it shouldn't be too bad. And so you can take the skirt off, and then you can so I have this weaved through, so you can take this cloth off, and then this is just a hook around the waist, and then that hook was kind of weaved through the cloth piece like that. So yeah, so now I'll just put the figure back together. This is the a lot of energy right here. If I can get it on. Yep. Okay, that's on there. It's just like takes a lot of effort, but it's not that bad. People are making it out to be like it's this horrible experience, but it's actually not that bad at all. And then because this piece right here has this little slot here, you don't actually have to take the figure apart to install it. It's actually very simple. I would just slide it through here and then go up and under, and then you just got to kind of feel around for it when you're working it up into that waist area, and then you should be able to get it in there without too much issue. There, I got it in there. Okay, and then you can bring this skirt piece back down to cover up that dragon butt, and then yeah, it's installed. So like, there's really not too much issue. If you don't want to pop it apart, easy enough. If you do want to pop it apart, use a ton of heat and just make sure you really get that angle in there. And finally, while I don't do a lot of ogre scale part swapping, I wanted to show at least one option, which is to take the scourge parts and put them on this figure. And they actually match really well. Like the blues and purples match really well with that. And I think the orange kind of gives it a little pop. So pretty nice look right there if you want to get creative with your scourge and Aracagorr. Anyway, this figure is absolutely incredible. It blows me away. Thanks for watching, and until next time, may the force be with you.